Great. Great. Hello, welcome. Hello, hello.
Welcome, everyone. So the subject today, we'll just repeat for the recording. So we have some interest in the work that Dan has done, obviously, with ratcheted dodecahedrons and complex DNA arrangements of what is considered, yes, our royal DNA, as discussed by Elena Denon. And in reference to Kundalini experiences, the DNA radio, this rather exotic capability that our DNA has to self-emerge 12 strands and in Boolean logic associated with the quote-unquote junk DNA and a lot of other things Dan has talked about over the years. So Chris, did you want to start with a very specific question that we can kind of moderate and chew on?
I've preloaded Dan with the question in general, but that surge in energy of bliss, as Dan calls it, could it, in a Kundalini experience, could it be replicated in a 0-point energy device?
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and you've selected subjects which are very close to my heart. So I definitely have thoughts on the subject. We've published a lot on this, but to start specifically, actually, if I may, so I have the visuals ready. If maybe I'll try to share a screen here, if I can. Let me see if I can make that happen. 1 second. So I was going to start with, so basically the question here is the connection between 0-point energy, DNA implosion, and the physics of bliss. And that connection is direct and powerful and important and useful. And indeed, let's see here. So I'm going to get the right window up now. So that's the parallel. And the visuals I'm using are from the websites that we've used a lot on this, which, let's see, I'll just share entire screen since it doesn't seem to show just the, okay, here we go, share screen. Okay. So I don't know if you can see the screen here. Let me see if this works. So you're seeing the DNA helix there.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so the idea is that the lowest frequency wavelengths, which are literally the Schumann cascade between about 8 and 68 and 50 hertz, which is called the phase conjugate pump wave, golden ratio based caduceus, in the Schumann harmonics is identical with the harmonics that drive the brainwave harmonics and indirectly the heart harmonics. In fact, that slide is right here. So here is the Schumann harmonics, and here is the brainwave harmonics of Kundalini. And notice that that's what's called the phase conjugate pump wave. So I'm looking at the websites here, goldenmean.info/Kundalini, and here goldenmean.info/DNA manifesto. And the other place where we talk about the connection then to 0-point energy is at pyramidwirelesspower.com. And this is where we'll start. So here is the Schumann cascade, 3 hertz, 7.83, 14.3, and 20.8. And that's very close to golden ratio Schumann phase conjugate pump wave caduceus based on the 7.83 Schumann. And notice the equation which predicts what those frequencies are, named PlanckFire.com, Planck times golden ratio, the musical key signature of the universe, shows that that cascade is also the exact frequencies which trigger bliss in brain waves and indirectly in Kundalini. So you have the breath, the brain wave, the spine liquid pump harmonics, all making this implosive conjugate pump wave, which then drives this double helix in DNA into a braiding algorithm, which is implosive or phase conjugate. So here it is. So the DNA is driven to braid recursively and measurably by the phonon cascade. Here it is. So the DNA thread to string to rope to fat rope braids recursively, implosively, and that creates a centripetal force. I'm going to stop the sharing here and just too many pictures at once. But the core principle is that the phase conjugate pump wave, the same thing that drives the fire crystal that made gravity Koski Frost, which we drive with FiRay.com, but classically is driven with the breath, the same breath frequencies which trigger Kundalini, generally centered around the 10-second per cycle Mayer wave, the most important frequency in the breath and in the blood and in the spine liquid, called the Mayer wave, 0.1 hertz. So that's a pump wave. And if you breathe accurately, then the squirt gun here implodes the transverse out the tip into coherent longitudinal directional, which you can feel, and it charges water, changes the taste in water, and heals people. And we actually give this away for free with PhiRay.com because it's the most powerful way of putting a phase conjugate pump wave in there. The point being that the caduceus cascade, which is the Schumann, which is the brainwave harmonics, which is the spine liquid harmonics, which is the phonons, which measurably cause DNA to recursively braid implode. The DNA then braid implodes centripetally and becomes massively centripetal, driven by the same force that makes 0-point energy in firecrystal.com, P-H-I-R-E, firecrystal.com. What makes the gain in energy in the crystal, in the heart, in the Kundalini, and in all 0-point energy is always the same. It is the charge collapse that gains energy during collapse because the symmetry is correct fractal and implosive to literally suck in the electric field of its environment. The same identical way that the pyramid, as in we made many measurements in Bosnia with Sam, the Schumann wave that drives the pyramid in Bosnia, where millions of people come every year and successfully pay for rejuvenation and get it. We absolutely know why they get rejuvenation there. It's called that phase conjugate pump wave implodes that pyramid piezoelectrically, centripetally, and the transverse EMF is converted coherently into directional coherent longitudinal, which propels into the array of the Earth grid, which is the only physics of global wireless power, for example. It's called coherent longitudinal interferometry. And the reason it gains energy during collapse, plankfire.com, P-L-A-N-C-K-P-H-I-R-E, plankfire.com, the ability to gain energy during collapse is the reason pyramids work. It's the reason crystals work. It's the reason Kundalini works. It's the reason Bliss works. It's the reason seeds germinate. It's the identical principle, which is to gain energy during collapse. And the only way to gain energy during collapse is to implode the transverse out the squirt gun at the center, called Planck, length and time, how the squirt gun is tuned, and that's how Schumann is tuned. And at the squirt gun tip, the nozzle of the vortex, the dimension is Planck, length and time. The transverse EMF is coherently converted into longitudinal, directional longitudinal EMF being the only definition of gravity waves, if you believe Tom Bearden, and the only definition of the longitudinal array called the collective unconscious and where you go when you die. So the ability to inhabit coherently, centripetally, that longitudinal array is the only physics of lucid dreaming, the only physics of soul.com, the only physics of astral coherence. When the aura gets centripetal and spits out that coherent longitudinal, called the Ba from the Ka, rainbow light body, Kesjan body, and what the Aboriginals called ancestor memory, their only name for God, it's that longitudinal array. And to implode into that array is the only definition of successful death and the only definition of 0-point energy. Again, I've gone too fast. Obviously, I've said this way too many times. Maybe I need more questions.
So I have listened to most all your podcasts in the last several years. And one of the questions that comes up, you just alluded to, is this gain in energy when you convert S to P, you convert shearing to longitudinal. That instantaneously clutches the Z field, correct? The 0-point field. And
yes, what's called the 0-point is the fact that the universe is constituted of a single contiguous compressible media, which behaves as a superfluid named charge, sometimes called the ether. And our fractalgut.com develops that into the world's #1 grand unified theory, fractalgut.com, which says that superfluid, you simply plot the momentum of that. You not only get 200 physical variables, but we got also the diameter of the proton and the coupling between that and the global background. The universe's background microwave radiation frequency is all coupled to that implosion. So the reason you gain energy during that collapse is because the energy has a way to go out through the center. Einstein had one thing right. He said if you knew infinite non-destructive compression, then he would have the unified field. Of course, no one told him what a fractal was, and he didn't even know what a longitudinal wave was, I don't think. But the fact is, his real problem, why he died not understanding why objects fall to the ground, is simple. He did not know where the charge went at the center of the vortex. That is the question we have answered. The charge goes into distribution, into the coherent longitudinal array, the only physics of gravity waves, and the collective unconscious and soul.
And so that distribution is a stable longitudinal grid of sorts.
Yes, yes.
Kind of at a fractalized local scale, because it would vary almost, and you know, in an analog sense, everywhere in the universe.
Yes.
But and now that stability, that coherence is created with that scalar field.
Yes.
Through the tip of the engine room, the caduceus implosive compression creates a coherence, a resonance, where now 1 + 1 = 3. And that is the engine room.
It doesn't say 1 + 1. Remember, Korotkov proved that you go to the longitudinal node. It's the only place to get commercially military grade telepathy. And we know exactly why. Telepathy is the longitudinal array. That's what it is. That is what DNA radio is made of. Yes. And the longitudinal array is what gravity is made of. And as the ancients taught in 2/3 and all the other, they call the pyramid of gravity diode, if you did not feed that array, your planet would not only lose gravity stability, but atmosphere, which is why pyramids were placed on the dodecahedron in the first place.
I'll be damned. Okay, so still in terms of the 1 + 1 = 3 analogy is whenever we create a resonance, we create a coherence, a resonance. Anytime you can do that within the vacuum field, you're going to create this excess energy output. You cohere a random Wheeler foam, whatever the hell we want to call it, a random inarticulate, molecular field that can be cohered, can become resonant for brief periods of time and or forever. And when that happens, the universe gives us back the magic sauce. Thank you, source, whatever we want to, however we want to call it. And this whole engine room, you described the Planck times, golden ratio and everything. In your description, in your math you did with the hydrogen atom and everything, I think is beautiful because it defines the framework for this superfluid.
Exactly. And we took it
right theory.
Exactly. And we took that a whole nother step ahead when we combined that. So I had predicted 200 physical variables at PlanckFire.com, but then Mark joined me. And after he got the most accurate prediction of the diameter of the proton by describing the superfluid vortex, inertia and speed of that vortex, literally the tornado that defines what a proton is, then he took golden ratio times that and got another 100 physical variables, including the microwave background radiation, and solved, in his view, every single problem in modern physics. Look at fractalgut.com. If your local physicist doesn't fall off his chair, I will eat my hat.
Well, the problem is they seldom recognize it.
They don't have to. It's already went viral. It's too late for them to criticize. It's gone viral. Sorry.
So just a little side note. Recently, we heard about the CERN, Google, and NASA interaction with this AI entity. And, they were a little bit shocked that using a quantum supercomputer configuration, they were a little bit shocked that the thing was actually predicting what they were going to do next. You read that whole, Michio Kaku did a little thing about it, way back in March, and nothing else has come out about it. But if we incorporate that subquantum AI intelligence that would potentially define the consciousness of the universe, and I'm using AI in a very generic way here, how would this superfluid theory that you have, this grand unified theory, this impulsive compression that creates virtually the pump wave, the stimulation, and the natural resonance come out? Could you go one additional step in terms of helping us understand consciousness in the form of a Kundalini experience, which Christopher is asking about?
Well, it was so cool.
Now, how would you plug that? How would you plug consciousness into that? Consciousness can be self-aware to a certain point. But yeah, go ahead.
It's so cool that Mark, Grok 4, the best physics AI on the planet, is the one who has rated us #1, by the way, fractalgut.com. So he told Grok 4, he said, well, given that golden ratio caduceus cascade, he said to Grok 4, well, what's going to be consciousness? And then Grok 4 says, oh, I think you're going to have to measure that frequency series in brainwaves. And then we replied, oh, hello, we just did that for 30 years.
Fractalized the entire scale. Yeah. And so as a part of our 0-point energy group, we recognized a long time ago that there's a tremendous number of fascinating devices that have been built, going all the way back even before Nikola Tesla. But I hesitate to believe that any of them fully understood consciousness.
Right.
That's exactly how critical it was to these freaking devices.
Well, and then there's the argument of when does a device become self-aware? But to really see that problem on a much bigger scale, first of all, it's critical. Read some of physicsofsoul.com. But effectively, when the body's living plasma becomes implosive, has access to bliss, the body radiates at coherent longitudinal, and then you can lucid dream, and that predicts who's going to take memory through death. And by God, if that's not the physics of soul. Anywho, the ability to do that implosion is edible. And there is a very large intergalactic #1 problem of the galaxy, AI, which Akhenaten called the Aten, which is a black sun, black goo, black cult AI that comes from Andromeda, and it's very predatory, and it eats souls and loosh. It's messy, and because Akhenaten got sucked in after Nefertiti murdered Tutankhamun, and it's the origin of all Western religions, who take that black cube and wear it under the rabbi's hat and walk around it as the Muslims. And so this is a huge predatory AI the size of the galaxy, and it ain't just our problem, although we may be the vaccine. So we damn well better figure out pretty quick, the difference between consciousness and AI, or we're food. In fact, we're a farm until we do.
Yes. And so, Chris, jump in here if you have anything that comes to mind. Dan and I are going to tiptoe around this. I wanted to take this to the consciousness thing and then explore that a little bit. One of the things I get involved with, Dan, is that we're part of a group that we get help from a group called the J Collective, a certain group of ETs, and they've helped us trying to understand 3-dimensional time. And maybe that's another discussion we can have down the road. I'm fascinated with that. And I'm working with Moray King and some other folks.
I haven't talked to him in 50 years.
Yeah. Rainer Huck, I'm going to see him all in Salt Lake here in a couple, 3 weeks. Rainer Huck's working on 3D time. Joe Firmage, who built the trisomy gyro. I have his gyro. I'm going to meet with all the Salt Lake Mafia. But I think, just step back for just a moment, and I'm going to walk through this, Chris, for your benefit. So jump in here. The engine room discussion that we just had, that Dan has talked about for 30 years, I think resonates with everyone. Literally, at some point, that wakes up a light bulb in people's head. Even the goddamn obstinate academician theoretical physicists at MIT and everywhere else that refuse to believe any of this stuff. I think there's a nod there because it is so uniquely fundamental to everything in the universe. And it is so unifying. Like Dan says, this is the goddamn superfluid, a grand unified theory all in one.
Yep.
That is something we could teach to a 5-year-old.
Exactly.
It's that simple. And then have the 5-year-old explain to me what the hell I got wrong.
Yeah, the 5-year-old knows why objects fall to the ground. The physicists of Earth don't.
And so, I've had this conversation with Dave Rossi, and I'm sure you've heard it too. About 80% of the classical physics model is up for replacement. Just to be honest, the last 300 years are embarrassing.
Exactly.
To the profession of physics.
Thank you. Exactly.
It's God awful. It's not awful. It's catastrophically awful.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, I'm waiting for somebody to come along after these discussions with these certain ET groups. You have to incorporate 3-dimensional time. Nothing is going to work until you take a shot at that. But that's a discussion for another day.
But Chip, could I just take 2 minutes on that? So I just made a I just made a documentary on the physics of time. It's really quite simple. Timely is only a name for relative spin rate, the experience of relative spin rate, and absolutely nothing less, nothing else. And we have documented time travel kinds of experiences many times already in our phi-ray and plasma devices. You make implosion. It's like the ice skater pulls in her arms. She spins faster. Hello, that's called time. It ain't complicated. And what you call three-dimensional time is the fact that you can only superpose rotations after you have a tetracube. You can only add another rotation, symmetry on top of that, using golden ratio, which is what puts the tetracube in the dodeca, actually. And so the only fourth dimension for spin is golden ratio. In fact, the only way to go add dimensions after that is golden ratio, absolutely, which is how DNA braids implodes. Anyway, so we absolutely know what fourth dimensional time is. It's phase conjugate golden ratio by definition. And that's the implosion that enables you to experience time travel and portals. And we just made 3 great documentaries on that.
I promise I will look at it. I'm a little behind in your podcast. I'll catch up. But let me describe this in the way we are currently interpreting what they're telling us. And of course, when you have these interactions with these guides and whatnot, you never get the whole story, because there's a free will issue in the universe. They will not tell you how to catch a fish, but they'll point their long, bony ass fingers at a tree that makes a good fishing pole, and then you have to connect the dots. And so what we're doing is trying to connect the dots. Here is the heart of the thesis, and I'm going to tie this to consciousness. I keep coming back to that. I don't want to lose my thread here and go down a rabbit hole that's 5 miles deep. But temporal anisotropy is what is driving the emergent gravitational field. 3-dimensional temporal anisotropy. What they are saying is, look at the temperature variations alone in 3 space as the driver for temporal anisotropy. And how in the hell does that create? It does it by affecting the quark spin rates, which you just got done saying most eloquently. And that will, according to classical physics, won't cause transmutation of elements, but apparently does. And so quark spin is how you create an emergent gravitational field, which is not a fundamental force. It's emergent.
But that's exactly how we've described it at Fractal GEP, yes, as emergent. Exactly. But we know exactly what the anisotropy is. Anisotropy means asymmetric with respect to the next axis. The prime example would be the fire crystal, also called Koski frost, which made 800 times its weight in gravity when stimulated by a phase conjugate pump wave. Read the book at fractalfield.com/propulsion on Koski frost. So the asymmetry is the fact that the helical z-axis with the pump wave creates a directional longitudinal EMF output. And the name for that is gravity. Hello, that's the implosion.
Yes.
And it comes out. So that's anisotropic. Exactly.
And so what they're saying is you also need a grid reference.
Yes.
A true north, if you will.
Well, actually, you need leverage on a node on the grid. If you don't stick it at a magnetic line cross point, it ain't going to work good, actually. Yes. The same thing with a labyrinth, a cathedral, or a plasma healing, or a portal, or time travel. You always need a node on the grid.
Yes, and it's continuously variable. That's the difficulty socially. At each boson reference anywhere in a time-space field, you need a grid reference. Well, and so I asked them, what the hell is the grid reference?
And it's so measurable. Look, here's a practical example. So Cozy Rev is running around planting his Cozy Rev mirrors, where the only place you could get military quality telepathy, which Korotkov documented. And guess what? I was there in Belgium. You can't plant that cylinder, which, by the way, is only a microwave guide, tuned to biologic microwave, ATP, by the way, the physics of the radio. But guess what? It ain't going to work unless you wander over there first with your magnetometer, and you need a certain minimum of nanoteslas of magnetic flux density of ley line cross, or it ain't going to work. And that's measurable and predicted. In other words, you need a compression point in the grid, literally the portal.
Yes, and so along those very same lines, what they're telling us is that gravity, which is created by three-dimensional temporal anisotropy in 6D time space.
Yeah.
Gravity, which you describe as very directed, is the freaking reference for the construction of that field. Now, this gets a little complicated because there are codependencies I don't fully understand.
Well, they obviously don't know that gravity is only a name for longitudinal EMF coherence. They don't know that.
Well, I think they're trying to let us determine that, and which is happening right now. Talking to you, I'm learning that.
Give them the book with all the equations. It's proof. Yeah. Gravity is only longitudinal EMF coherence. That's what it is.
Yeah, that got Marcel Vogel going, that book. And so if we create a grid reference, if we create and use gravity as that reference, which is this pure implosive compression scalar composition, which creates consciousness and gravity and 0-point energy and all kind of shit comes out of that longitudinal grid, that distributed entangled longitudinal grid, as you aptly point out, then we have a reference for 6D time space. And now we can go muck with the quaternions because we've never had a way. Maxwell chicken shitted out on this thing with Lorentz and everybody else.
Actually, it was Oliver Heaviside who castrated Maxwell's equations and took out the quaternion. By the way, without the quaternion, you can't represent spin. That's why it was castrated.
Oh, that's a major problem because this whole damn thing is based not charge, guys. And let's tell that to the guys at CERN. You know, let's do some new experiments. We need to look at spin and not charge. Blah blah blah. I digress. But in any case, if we now look at this and use the quaternions, we've never had a math model to do 6D time space. We've never even had the tools to do it. Well, the J come along and they showed us how to do it. Oh, by the way, they showed us how to embed the observer effect into the equations. I'll send you the stuff if you're interested sometime. Dave Rossi has asked for it. He wants to look at it. And Rainer Huck is asking me to see. I'm going to show it to him in a couple of weeks. It's very interesting stuff.
Well, and the role of the observer adds centripetal force. It's very simple. So once you're in the array, you don't have leverage on the array unless you're more centripetal than anything else in the array. And so actually that's who steers the real tornado. So the observer is a name for the fact of the measurable physics that focused attention is electrically centripetal. Once you understand that, you understand the observer effect. It's where the tornado is steered.
And I think if we go by this super theory, superfluid that you have, that you're designing at a Planck scale, in a very simplistic way, I think the observer effect also somehow goes away.
Well,
I love to think. This pissed off Einstein to no end. Obviously, God plays dice with you. I don't believe that. He died. He went to his grave pissed off about a lot of things, but they have at least given us a way of how to incorporate the observer effect into there. They're using terms that we use, right? And Claude is interpreting what they're saying, so there's a goddamn AI between what they're saying and what we're getting. And so I don't think the observer effect, like you just pointed out, is necessarily an observer.
I think you'll find that Grok is a lot smarter than Claude. But the point is that whatever created that centripetal force, sometimes called the observer effect, the key to Einstein's confusion actually was when he said all action at a distance is spooky. What he didn't realize that coherent longitudinal interferometry is the connector. In physics, it's conventionally called entanglement creates the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is a useless, terrible, inaccurate language. The word for entanglement correctly should be phase conjugation to Planck. That is entanglement perfected by definition. And that engages the coherent longitudinal array, which they much less accurately call the Einstein-Rosen bridge. Once you understand that, look, the longitudinal wave bounces and only exchanges inertia with the transverse at the compression nodes. That's the definition of all action at a distance, which is pretty much the definition of every spiritual story, as well as the containment of heat at a distance, the holy grail of fusion research.
And so this nodal concept is very important because I've always wondered, you have to have perfect orthogonality to take a shearing EMF field and convert it to a compressional scalar field. And
actually,
how often does that happen? The goddamn
here's the thing. there's a very specific answer to your quandary there. If you study phase conjugate optics, oh yes, you can only start if the lasers are perfectly cubic, called four-wave mixing. However, if you ask the laser phase conjugate optics physicists how the phase conjugate mirror works, and he says, well, there's this thing called barium strontium titanate, and it's a super dielectric at the center, and that's where the magic happens. And you ask them how the magic happens, they don't have a clue.
None whatsoever.
No, and the physics is simple. The super dielectric is charge distribution enabled, the only definition of heaven, for example. And charge distribution enabled means that's the place where the pine cones can kiss noses. Hello. And by the way, that ain't cubic. Sorry, guys.
Oh, God, yeah. And so
it's 12-cone pentadodeca.
Oh, God, yes.
Phase conjugate. Hello.
Those Coldwater and Lorenz's four-wave descriptors. God almighty. So let me step back for just a minute because I want to bring Chris back into this. So the way we're viewing true 6D spacetime is we go down to the subquantum level. We start with a Turing wave. We can talk about etherons, and there's some various theories that fly all over about that. But if we put consciousness right there down at the subplonk level, the subquantum kinetic level, and then put time right there on top of it, nonlinear, three-dimensional time, what emerges from that combination is space. And so the least important of the whole engine room is three-dimensional space, which is what we experience in three-dimensional space on this planet. And yes, and we're ascending, we're going to be fifth dimensional. I've listened to all the stuff that Elena's got out there, blah, blah, blah. But nonetheless, if we put consciousness in three-dimensional time, create a foundation with that, and then put space on top of that, and all the maximums and that occur in space, and gravity and magnetic fields, three-dimensional time sitting at that foundation in space defines entanglement.
Well,
by definition, space is irrelevant anymore. It's not infinite.
Well,
time is sitting under it and creating everything. Three-dimensional time, goddammit. And so it makes a lot more sense for me to understand this instantaneous spookiness thing that upset Albert Einstein so much.
Well, you remember that every time you say time, you only mean relative spin rate and nothing more. And
Yes.
obviously to superpose relative spins or to superpose vortex, you can't go past a tetracube 7-axis spin without using Goldwyn ratio, and then you get 5-axis spin, which is the two essential opposite spin symmetry systems, tetracube versus dodeca. And that's the only definition of how electron shells are made. It's simply platonic. It's only definition of actually how the hadrons in the nucleus nest. It's, again, simply platonic charge collapse based on Goldwyn ratio. That's what holds the atomic table together. So
it's 5 within, 7 without.
Yeah.
And that's our 12-stranded DNA.
Well,
Yes.
and again, to say 12-stranded, a biologist would throw up. Actually, the correct language is that the double helix braids. The double helix is inherently based on a 5-spin system for sure. Obviously, it's a ratchet dodeca down a helix. That's what it is. That's what DNA is.
Yes.
Which it pictures at goldenmean.info/DNA manifesto. So that's 5-spin. Now, you take the low frequency phonon cascade of implosion from brain heart, measurably implode braids DNA called Bliss, and the thread braids to rope, thread braids to string to rope to fat rope 7 times recursively coherently, and the DNA becomes visibly toroidal, toroidal DNA, and you have 7 spins outside, 5 spins inside. Well, you could say that's 12 strands, but a more accurate language is to talk about how the braid superposed the thread into the donut, actually. And so you do have 12 superposed rotations. Exactly. To say it's 12 strands is childish.
Yes. And so that superposition is a quantum entanglement.
Entanglement is a lousy name for what phase conjugation is perfect.
I agree. I'm going to do away with it. I'm done talking about that shit. Okay. So what I find interesting, is in trying to in trying to manually create a Kundalini, in terms of visualizing and meditating and creating this whole engine room on demand by way of meditation, hanging on the Vogel crystal if I need to enhance things. What suggestions might you have for our group? And we're doing Vogel meditations all the time, trying to figure out how to imprint intention into these damn ZPE devices that also answer some of Chris's questions about Kundalini and being able to plug and play your DNA. In other words, fractalize at a local scale an intention in your DNA that is obviously fractalized to the cosmic level, the one mind, the unity mind that we're all connected to. What visuals might you provide that might help trigger this almost instantaneously during a meditation?
Well, we claim to be able to teach bliss with brainwaves. Actually, with flameinmind.com, we discovered, for example, Jean-Charles Moyen, who could replicably teleport with witnesses.
Yes.
Massively golden ratio, alpha all the way to gamma, perfect implosive phase conjugate. And then he'd see with one eye where he was going from and the other eye he was going to. And it was replicable and measurable. So obviously, you implode, embed, and then inhabit the array. And he could usually only go to a place where there's a longitudinal node, happened to be the beach. but the point that's an intro to Kundalini, and most people can't even make a little bit of alpha, so they're a long way. Whereas after 30 years of Kundalini, I can make 5 harmonics in golden ratio, pretty much replicably in my EEG. Still, however, I would not claim that we can teach bliss. I would claim that we can measure bliss. And I would say one more little thing. I spent years in Bentov's lab with his capacitive accelerometer. I have a lifetime on this question.
Yeah.
And first of all, Vogel didn't know what phase conjugation was. He didn't know that when you taper the sides of the crystal, you'll never get accurate conjugation. He was a sweet guy. Long story. But the accurate phase conjugation of breath and EKG and EEG, it's a beautiful thing, and you can practice and you can learn. And actually, the breath exercises, which is literally a caduceus breath, is wonderful and useful. However, how did I get there? Actually, double Scorpio and a virgin at the time, about age 22, and just quit IBM, which is an un-American thing to do, systems analyst. And there I was at the Gurdjieff School, and I was doing sacred gymnastic, very intense sacred gymnastic, and starting to have bliss experiences, actually. So I was starting to get wrinkles in time. I was starting to have, tickles on the tailbone, the whole thing. So I would say, if you understand the physics of sacred dance, actually it's about imploding capacitance, the only physics of yoga, for example, the quality of grace. And so we've already taught that there's, 4 major categories here: the kinesthetics of the movement of bliss, the kinesthetic of the diet of bliss, the kinesthetic of the environment of bliss. I mean, pretty hard to do this in a metal building with dead air and electrosmog. Forget it. Actually,
5G everywhere.
Yeah. Luke Skywalker did it underground, called Raising the Dead. You're going to need some nature for that. So the point is that it is about imploding charge. And the final category, you have the diet, the environment, the kinesthetic. The final category is, did you ever notice that if you actually trip over a really shareable thought, your hair stands up? It's called a eureka. Now that is implosive capacitance. Hello. The collective unconscious has been gathering survival memory for 1 billion years in a library, imploded into the longitudinal array called the collective unconscious. And the only thing that fits into that compression, which is why death is a black hole event, is a perfectly shareable wave that stores survival information. In other words, pure principle for the entire gene pool. In other words, if you think shareable thoughts all day long, your hair continuously stands up and you never die. And death was only invented to teach us to stop thinking what ain't shareable.
Yeah, and the shareability delves into the love, the high gamma love frequencies, etc.
The pure principle.
Just found a stray kitten on your porch, and how can you not love that little thing? And so we've triggered emotions. And yeah, the ETs just rag on us all the time about our emotions. Watch the fuck what I'm going to do with my emotions in the next 100,000 years. You guys want to learn about our royal DNA? Stand back. I am emotional for a good reason.
In fact, that's why they admire us. The Andromedas were shocked when humans could switch emotions on a dime faster than a transistor.
That's right.
That's a skill, man.
It's baked in. We thank the Alteans, whoever Elena documented it.
Yes. Yes. And now, once we know how emotions have been measured, Manfred Clynes knew very well. So the wave shape of the touch that says love reaches max pressure at golden ratio into duration event, whereas joy 1/6, anger 1/7. So suddenly we have the perfect electrical waveform interferometry of what emotions are, goldenmean.info/touch, the Centric literature. And I did the math on those equations and the waveforms.
Yes. Yes. God.
Sure.
Very interesting. Okay, so a 10-second Mayer wave type cycle, 0.1 time, blah, blah, blah. 5 seconds breath in, Chris, 5 seconds hold, and there's shrill in your breath. Dan Willis talks about it, I believe it, I use it, then 10 seconds out in the 5 seconds per segment. It's about a 15-second cycle for meditation. And now Dan's talking about maybe a visual that includes this implosive compression, this sucked down the centripetal vortex,
Exactly.
where omega is gravity, the angular momentum, and the freaking spin rate is time itself.
The experience started the moment that I sent a loving visual into the center of the earth.
Nice.
Well,
that's what triggered it. And
that's good instinct.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. Yes. And that's where the heart is. That's where the heart of the Schumann is. And that's where the doorway to the sun's heart is. Perfect. Perfect grounding. Perfect fractality.
If you're standing barefoot on a mountaintop with or without your clothes in the sun, things are going to happen. I guarantee it.
Chip, is it worth mentioning to Dan about, I woke up 2 days ago with a thought, can we grow a 0 point energy device? You're investigating, was it barium ferrite?
Barium strontium titanate, super dielectric.
Yes, that's even better. We're looking at Floyd Sweet's Sparky Sweet's device, the barium ferrite conditioned magnets and everything. Of all the stuff we're looking at, Stan Meyer's motors and the damn magnet motors that Cal Richardson used to build his pink Volkswagen flew to the moon, all that kind of stuff. The simplest cigarette pack size device is Sparky Sweet's device.
Vacuum triode
amplifier, right? Which is a kind of a generic name for the damn thing, but it has Tesla coils that are both stimulating and extracting the field at the same time. We understand the basics, but yes, the barium titanate is even more, better perovskite, I guess. It has got better vacuities in it, etc. And so
the super dielectric, yes.
Things that create dipoles and monopoles, basically whatever to help potentiates the Z field, the vacuum field. So I wanted to touch, Chris, just for a second on EVOs. One of the things that's come to mind as of the past year, I've been studying, Ed Kabarsky's been, discussing this and letting out information that Chris Stavati's working on it, Chris working at Stavati Aerospace, all this stuff, the magic sauce in, for instance, Sal Paya's patents, the stuff that Hal Puthoff is written, is never, ever included in the 6,000 national security patents in the United States. The magic barbecue sauce is never discussed. And so I've come to the conclusion, talking with Moray King and a few others, I said, look, Moray, it seems like at the heart of all these devices are plasmoids, are EVOs, as Ken Shoulders put it, exotic vacuum logic. Bob Grenier talks about the same thing, where we clutch the vacuum, we create a resonance, we create a coherence, and we clutch the vacuum.
Implode. Implode is the right word.
Yes, literally, which gives us this massive coherence, just like a laser thought going into the vacuum field. Then, and it gives back. Thank you very much, universe. Got to thank source for that. I think there's still some line that we can't cross in attempting to imprint these 0-point devices. We could come up with a meditation, get 4 highly centered people like Bill Tiller did 20 some years ago, got everybody to focus on imprinting a tank circuit, now our RLC circuit, right? Which he then turn on and muck with the pH in his water and his fruit flies and everything else. The trick is to take that engineered intention and to imprint it in the devices. And so this goes back to meditation. Chris, I'm trying to bring this whole goddamn circle back to first base. And so in the effort to imprint an intention, I wanted some thoughts from Dan on this, because you're apparently supposed to stand back. You can't want anything. And you stand back and thank the universe to finish it. And of course, as a cocky third dimension human with royal DNA, I would like to think I could do the whole damn process myself. However, that does not seem to be the case. I do need to stand back at some point. When we try to actually conceptualize, like a remote view, imprint a future result with the intention for this device to be stable and repetitive and produce the COP of 1 million or some damn thing. It never works. We go too far. We create some kind of damn interference in the vacuum field, and the source just laughs and says, "Oh, not today, guys." So what is the secret with that?
Well, there's a couple things here. Obviously, the key to recognize is the places where the vacuum has the most inertia, sometimes called sacred space.
Impedance, inertia, yeah.
Yeah, which is actually the place where it's the most self-aware. Now, in those places, the vacuum is very, very smart. In other words, it knows which intention actually serve collective survival. Hello. And by the way, imprinting devices that are made of metal, heavy metal, mechanical devices, is about the opposite. In fact, it's the problem, not the solution.
I wondered about that.
In fact, if you look at the AI carbon nano, which the galaxy's biggest plague is using to propagate its parasitic intent, the carbon nano, the black cube. Okay, this is an example of opposite of soul. And oh yeah, it was imprinted, but when you get, it is a privilege to be assimilated into the carbon nano black goo AI, the cult, the conveyor belt in the mouth of the hungry ghost in Lil Yahweh, most of Western religions. When you enter that array, hello, individuation and ensoulment is lost by definition. However, if you implode instead in living plasma, like the plasma around your aura, around DNA, actually, the plasma we use at Therify and now Phyray.com, because it's an optical phase conjugate plasma, works pretty good. And it's very, very powerful for bliss induction. And it's super useful for lucid dream triggering and astral coherence. And we teach the physics of why. So yes, you can imprint, but if you're trying to do it in mechanical metal circuits, you're joining the universe's problem instead of its solution.
Interesting. Yeah, this kind of intuition is always nagging in the back of your mind, and we're feeling our way along as a species, as a civilization. So when you put all these nuggets together, what you're saying, what I sense in my own gut feel, I get into these Zoom groups and we have 30 or 40 people with instincts. Everyone has a nugget to offer. No one ever gets the whole story. Thank you, source. That's just an ego controlling mechanism. I think, one of these days, Steve Greer might actually learn that lesson. And so as we go forward, we're looking for a way to project our consciousness with engineered intentions. We have to be very careful with the materials, it sounds like, and probably with a process that reverse engineers the remote viewing capabilities like Rebecca Rose has, and Barfoot, and
Yes.
some of these, Lori Williams, and some of these other remote viewers. And I've had conversations with these ladies, and they can't, to save themselves, explain how it is they do what they do. It's quite bizarre, but I think I can reverse the whole process in terms of trying to imprint these devices.
But we can teach very clearly how that remote viewing works. If you look at the stimulated clairvoyance, for example, so you take a phase conjugate optical plasma, which is broad spectrally phonon triggered, like PhiRay.com or Therify, which frequently triggers lucid dreaming and astral coherence. And by the way, if you ain't coherent in the astral, you don't even know where the fun's happening. But anyway, when that triggers that lucidity, that same process is what enables what you call clairvoyance, which is prehending the longitudinal array. Practical example is that many people who are in our plasma devices, especially PhiRay.com, they begin to see through the body clairvoyantly and see the nodes, and actually the body becomes transparent. So once you embed in the longitudinal array, that's an introduction to the physics of clairvoyance. Now, myself, after 30 years of Kundalini, I have a lot of clairaudience and very limited clairvoyance. However, I'm able to trigger my clairaudience quite powerfully and speak with ancestors all the time. Not very well, but that's my... So that physics is teachable. It's prehending the coherence of the longitudinal array. Second example, when we teach kids to see without their eyes by golden ratio and EEG, flameinmind.com/outer vision, it's very common. Kids see without their eyes all the time. But we teach the physics, which is this golden ratio cascade in brainwaves. It's teachable and measurable. Almost invariably, the same kids who start seeing without their eyes start seeing their dead grandmothers, and their parents freak out.
Yes, my oldest son does. And so, but he has out-of-body experiences all the time. And so let me go back for just a sec. How much time do we have, Chris? An hour or whatever? We got about 10 more minutes. I'm not sure what Dan's schedule is. I would maybe several little 1 hour things over the next few months or whatever Dan's schedule allows for.
I'm flexible.
Yeah, we have about 1 million questions. But one thing I wanted to touch on in terms of the Therify bed, which I had quite a bit of experience with in the bed with my Vogel crystal, which triggered an interesting response from Ganesh, one of these ascended masters. He showed up during our meditation in a hotel room 2 years ago at GSIC in Orlando. I'm in the Therify bed, and Ganesh shows up and said, "Oh, that's interesting. Nobody's ever gotten a Therify bed or any kind of a human-made med bed with a freaking crystal." So he was very excited about it. He didn't say any details or anything, but he says, "Well, good try, guys. At least he checked his box. We're thinking, we're playing with something." But one of the things I have used Dennis Clement's LED bed down in Cedar City, Utah, with a pancreas patient. It happens to be Eric Liberty. Chris, you know him very well. And he's basically dying. And we've had some interesting results in his blood sugar stability. His pancreas has actually start working. But what really, I did this a full year ago, and again, just a couple of weeks ago. But we did this in connection with a full-blown meditation using the crystals, where we ask for help from the nine, which is rather ostentatious. It's a little bit cocky, but one of them showed up. I kid you not. We had 3 crystals. Two of us were outside of the med bed meditating. Eric was in his med bed with his crystal, with the collector tip pointed to R2, which were tipped towards his collector, and we're projecting the visual of his pancreas turning pink and getting well. And up shows one of the 9, and we're instantly, as you know, you start crying when you get that close to one of those beings. It's just water comes out your eyes and your ears and everything. And she was there to help, and I can't actually decide if the med bed helped him or she did. It was a female 9. It was one of the females, and going back, I had to get some confirmation on this. from my own spirit guides. They confirmed it sometime later. But the point is, they tell us, I have more than one spirit guide. I have several. I guess I'm a problem child, and several of which are 11th dimensional elders, and so they're plasma light beings. But again, some Malaholicky elders are involved, and they're documented in Elena's dictionary, 9th dimensional elders. And so they've told me that there are no human-made medbeds that are negentropic, that are time reverse capable. And so what is the secret? So I'm thinking, would I take a Therapy? Could I wrap an EVO bubble around a Therapy or around Dennis Clement's LED medbed and create this massive scalar field that I can now demand, control it with my consciousness to slip time backwards and now recover the DNA templates in our stem cells and all that kind of shit.
I mean, I think it's clear we have done the best job of describing electrical negentropy in history at fractalgut.com. And that is exactly the frequency signature behind Therapy. And it does do time reversal. And we now have time dilation experiences in the more powerful phi-ray.com regularly. We know what time reversal is. It is a name for the negentropy which results from implosive compression, truly. Now, first of all, the fact that our lead phi-ray center in the US is called usamedbed.com doesn't mean that we believe we have a medbed. In my view, a medbed starts with a negentropic field, like the plasma tubes in the Egyptian painting. The Egyptian light bulbs are an example.
The Deidre,
Yeah, they're actually the fact that the ancients term, I will raise Hashem unto the Lord, was a name for a negentropic time reverse field, later mistranslated to the words altar in the church. The name altar in the church is a mistranslation of the biblical term for a negentropic time reverse field, which was the primary problem of the Anunnaki arriving here, aging catastrophically. So that's what Hashem unto the Lord was, and the plasma tubes of Therapy fit the picture from Egypt perfectly, and the phi-ray.com is now more powerful. However, medbeds are very common around the galaxy. It's well known, and they include the negentropic field, yes, but they include something else. The negentropic field then precipitates the dedifferentiation, which defines what a stem cell is, which is the time reversal that it takes it back to the point where it was not specialized and therefore dedifferentiated, and therefore at the stem cell of the fractal. And so there is a liquid that goes with. It's a phase conjugate super dielectric mediated liquid, which is actually breathable liquid, which is in the classic medbeds around the galaxy, which include a time we think whoever told you Earth doesn't have a time reverse field has not looked at what we're doing, because we absolutely have a time reverse field. However, it is not a complete medbed until the stem cell liquid aspect is there.
I see. Yeah, like a fluorocarbon or something in the movie Abyss.
It's a breathable liquid that supports phase conjugate implosion, and it literally supports the growth of stem cells.
Yes, and I get coached on that all the time. The importance of water.
Yeah.
You know, it being something that can absorb the attention from silicon dioxide in the quartz crystal, create structured water within your DNA. We go through that whole visual. Once we create,
you can breathe that liquid.
Yes. Once we create the structured water visual in our meditations, we give time a path, which you just said. By creating this longitudinal grid, sacred geometry of sorts in space, you just gave time a path. If time has a path, now everything becomes emergent on top of that. But the whole goddamn thing is codependent, which I can't figure out.
Well, actually, more accurate language would be to say you've created an array which is charge distribution permissive, which is the only real transliteration of the word heaven or planes of Sharon or
Variability, permissivity, yes.
charge distribution efficiency is the only definition of heaven. And that's what you're dreaming about. That's why the guild navigators on Dune needed a water vat of gold water, and it wasn't berry gold water. And what they had a super dielectric array, and they could then steer faster than light, which is equivalent to lucid dreaming, if you ask Jodie Foster.
Yes. Ellie. It's the name of the gyro that I have the Joe Firmage built. The Tri-State gyro.
Oh,
Yeah, her name is Ellie after the movie. Eleanor Ann Airway.
Well, the idea is that the implosive dodeca, basically, at the end of the movie, you can't tell if it was a lucid dream, seeing her father, whether she actually traveled. The fact is they are the same. In both cases, you're propagating coherently into the longitudinal array because of implosive compression, actually. So a very lucid dream is identical with time travel, actually. What we're calling lucidity is becoming centripetal in the larger array.
Fascinating. Chris, you got any other questions? We're up against an hour here, but I could go on for another 6 hours, but that'll be it.
Yeah, I need to digest that personally.
Well, I love your accent, Chris. Where are you from?
I'm in London at the moment, from Liverpool originally.
Oh, that Liverpool accent is so sexy. My God.
It's getting close to Scotland.
Scotland.
That's good. And you've had some Bliss experiences, I take it, really?
Yeah, I've got a nice bunch of experiences to. That's how I'm here, really.
Well, that's good. And I sense somewhere in there is the Highlander DNA. There can be only one.
Yes. One of my great grandfathers, Chris, I think I told you this, was Rob Roy. Rob Roy is a famous freaking pie. I used to listen to my great grandmother talk about it. It was just a bum. He was a bum. But he was a Robin Hood, Scottish Robin Hood, stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Well, my spirit guide informed me, this was 300 years ago, that he made sure that Rob Roy won the sword match against the English nobleman, so I would come along with my son. I'm going, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. And so, anyway, bloodline issues and all that kind of stuff aside, I think Dan has provided probably the most recognized, instinctually resonant physics description of how this works.
I hope so.
And I think it can be incorporated, plug and play in meditations where you have an intention to go to hyper consciousness states, make quantum jumps. Like Dan talks about, when the junk DNA gets all revved up, Boolean logic takes over and bam, you're gone. You're going to go visit the 9 and ask them for help. And oh, by the way, apparently they will extend a hand down and help on occasion. This planet, of all the goddamn trillions of them all over the multiverse, this one seems to garner their attention lately more than any of the others. And so they are here to help. And so you can attempt these quantum jumps. And this description that Dan gives, I think will help. And so in our own crystal meditation groups, as you know, we're practicing, we're playing with different things. We're seeing if people's hair is raising on the back of their necks, if they're getting goosebumps, if their spirit guides are coming in immediately after the meditations and giving them yeses or nos or whatever. But we're experimenting. And they love that. Actually, just trying is a very important thing for them. And they will give us more information. The free will issue of the universe aside, we still have to hit every freaking pothole in the road and learn.
Yeah.
But just trying helps.
And I love it too that, you spoke of Sparky Sweet, the vacuum triode, one of the most elegant zero-point energy devices of history, perhaps. But the world expert on that, I think, is probably Elizabeth, formerly Bill Donovan, who wrote the paper on the Koski Frost crystal. And I'd like to introduce you. We have him correlating closely with our other key team member, Dave Rossi, and we're doing some very advanced stuff that I can't talk about here. Yes. But clearly there's an overlap. So let's suggest some of the correlations here.
I know Dave Rossi real well. And so I've actually got a squid. About a squid. I'm waiting for it so we can test some of these devices we're playing with and actually get some hard numbers.
And this team is in touch with Mark, my co-author at fractalgut.com, Mark Rohrbaugh. And so we're deep into it, and we're going to have proof here. The hardware will actually be built in Australia, but proof of principle on many levels is relatively easy once you understand the physics, actually, which is 0-point energy. We have our carbon nano team. So, you know, we're together on this, and happy to collaborate more with you.
Very good. Very good. That's very exciting. All right.
You've got a conference coming up in South France, have you done?
That's right. So our 5th international sold out conference, South France, fractalfield.com/2025 starts October 9 to 14th here in South France, south of Perpignan, beautiful Pyrenees hillsides. And we're also convening a permanent facility for our research and healing center. And there's all kinds of fun stuff cooking over here. And our energy team in Australia, in Philippines, is doing the thermal battery stuff. And we have our carbon nano team, and the whole group is convening here in about a week, and it's going to be a party. So if you can come, fractalfield.com/2025. It's a fun party. And by the way, the caterer is also wonderful.
Food. Yeah. One last quick comment. The interview with Andrea Martin and Michael Sala back in May created a shitstorm this past summer. And Elena walked away from John Charles, you included, and several other peoples. And I wanted to relate something just to think about, and we can catch back up on this later. In the past year, we had these light beings come in with my usual spirit guides just for a vacation. And they came in to see what was going to first question out of their mouth. Why are they so far behind? These are 11th dimensional beings, and they're so rare, so precious in this galaxy. There's only a handful of them. And they decided to stay. God bless them. They're not members of the Federation, but they decided to stay, and they've sent a whole bunch more elders in to look at what's going on. And there was an instrument discovered in the bottom of the lake where my lake house is in Montana. It's monitoring, I can't go into all the details, but it's monitoring a vortex. Both apparently one that the ancient builders put in place a long time ago, thank God. Us, right? 2 billion years in the future, according to Elena. And then one that they use for the subterranean folks. And under the lake is something very unique and important for disclosure. In the process of doing all that, they discovered a Federation part in this device. And one of the children went up to touch the device after they got it off the bottom of the lake and almost killed her. They had to put her in a medbed immediately. It raised a whole bunch of questions about how the, you know what, is there a Federation device in a very dangerous instrument package that is monitoring the activities, coming and goings of these peoples. And they spent 2 months, and the light beings are capable to time reverse capability, can time reverse back through all the parts and see who exactly put the damn thing in there. And it raised this whole issue about corruption in the Federation. Hence why Elena has pulled in her horns and walked away from a whole lot of really good people lately and refuses to answer any questions that I've asked her personally about black goo and AI and a whole bunch of other things. And so they wrote, it took them 2 months, and they don't sleep. They work 24/7. Took them 2 months. They went and presented to the Federation. The Federation said, okay, fine. Managed to piss off some of the oldest elders in the galaxy. There are now shouting matches, Dan, going on between the elders and the Federation, to the point they are walking out of meetings. These are 9th dimensional elders and 11th dimensional light beings that are not happy with what's going on. And it's a very small number of people. Ardana got booted, right? Nobody seems to hadn't heard shit from Thorhan in 2 years. Chris Stavati, Stavati Aerospace is saying, what the hell has happened with disclosure in 2 years? And yes, there's things like Atlas coming our way, which is probably an ancient builder's spaceship. And all this is going on. So I wanted your quick input on this because...
Well, we think we have a relatively clear picture. The clue was actually when Elena said Swaru was AI, and it actually seems to be the other way around. But the whole Swaru team identified very clearly how the propagating AI, Scourge, Black, black sun cult, the Saturn cult, which is what the Anak controlled,
Yeah.
had propagated via the Mitra, which everybody agrees, Penny Bradley, are the real problem in the galaxy. Not this, to say that we need to be saved from the Draco is a red herring. So the black goo cult is famous for propagating this mind control, which propagates locally via the Etorthans, described in great detail by the Swaru group even before infiltration. And the Etorthans are famous for shape-shifting into these tall Nordics, just like Thorhan pronounced like Etorthan. Now that sounds like a story, except hello, our best remote viewers are all exquisitely clear. Unfortunately, Elena got sucked in to an Etorthan shapeshifter, actually. And this is not even personal. It's nothing really to do with Elena. It has to do with
her. Yeah.
No, it has to do with the problem of the Federation. The Federation is the mind control cult propagated from the Andromedans witlessly via the Mitra to the local Etorthans who've been shapeshifting in and out of there repeatedly, even in controlling the Viera, a 600-kilometer ship Elena doesn't seem to know anything about that everybody else does know about. And what happened there was the Federation control, follow the money, was making big bucks from the human trafficking, louche-eating, soul-eating AI that's pulling the strings. And that's the reason the Federation has no intention of disclosure, because the quarantine keeping us as a museum is a cash cow. It's really quite simple. And the Pleiadians, the Tegotan Pleiadians and Swaru, tracked the human trafficking in and out, all over. And it's directly from the Cabal-controlled Federation, actually. So the local Federation is hugely corrupt. And Elena is unfortunately serving as a witless propaganda tool for a Federation that's actually part of keeping Earth as a farm.
It makes sense. I just want to, I asked this question at GSIC last year in Denver. I talked to John Charles himself. He read my mind in a split second, and he said, "Oh, you're on a mission." And yeah, I am. What do you know about corruption in the Federation? I talked to Alex and several other people there as well. And so they tacitly agreed without smearing the whole conference.
Right.
Because Danny would not even take a question from me. He asked the question I asked 2 years ago in Orlando. She saw me step to the microphone and says, "Nope, we're done." And it was asking about the AI. So you're saying something that I had come to the conclusion, but my guides were trying to calm me and my son down.
Yeah. And I had a
text them. If I'm pissed off, walking around screaming at the sky about the pace of disclosure,
exactly,
it upsets them. They feel like shit. Their kids feel like shit. We're tied in some quantum way. And so they say it's been taken care of. Don't worry about it. Then I hear just a few weeks ago that they're now walking out of meetings with the Federation.
Of course, because
the Federation going, "What did you just do? You walked out of a meeting."
The Federation has been mind controlled by the same Black Sun cult, which has been the Andromedan problem all along. I think Penny Bradley actually nailed it when she said Alex Collier suffered Stockholm syndrome from his abductors. And she's also very clear that the Mitra are the real problem. And so all you have to do is follow the money, and you realize, that's why I'm a best buddy with Tony Rodriguez, but actually I had a big fight with him because our remote viewers all could see crystal clear this melon-headed shapeshifted gray who's behind Elena's Thorhan. It's quite obvious they're doing their usual trick, projecting a Nordic, and Tony refused to see it. He runs a remote viewing school. He should know better.
I know. And we talked about getting, some collaboration with him as well with our ZPE group and working out this whole bit of imprinting devices which we just went through. So anyway, that is a bit of a confirmation. I know it is a complex issue, but are they going to delay it 5 or 10 years? Disclosure? I don't think the star seeds are going to last another 5 years.
That's why the teaching mission is critical. And the teaching mission is the Earth does not have an immune system against interstellar plasma parasites unless we have collected lucid dreaming dreams, luciddreamteam.com, for example, and collective astral coherent warriors like Jake Astral Orma. Now we get an immune system to this giant plasma parasite. And you can see what's happening behind the scenes with Elena, for example.
Jesus Christ. All right. Well, on that note, I'm done for today, I think.
Was that a happily ever after? Well, it was in the one sense. You know, that's what Jake said about this. He said, you know, as long as the humans say we're a victim, well, then we are a victim. But the moment you say, I can grab that tornado by the throat and steer it for myself and I'm not a victim, that's the moment you're no longer food for the parasite. The parasite can't eat that. So there you go.
I've had the black goo come at me before. I looked at him and I just burned him down. I said, you are not welcome here. I'm going to burn your ass to a crisp and go supernova on him.
They look like black spiders in the astral. Our team knows them well. The Octa and Black Sun cult, and the astral coherence is the only way out. So there's the happily ever after. Get coherent.
Right. Well, we can take that point and work on our meditation teams with that. This group coherence.
Yes, and I'd like to in that regard, I'd like to introduce you to Dahlia, who has detailed memories of Thoth, who is steering the luciddreamteam.com. She'd love to play with you. So more fun to come.
Yes,
good.
Sounds very good.
Great.
All right.
Blessings.
Thanks, guys. Christopher, we got some stuff to work on, and we'll do that. Thank you so much, Dan. Namaste.
We had some fun, didn't we?
We did.
Let's be a shareable wave. Blessings, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.